Alright, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me on a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week for the week of June 5th on the Music Reviewer Podcast. If you're new to Best and Worst Track of the Week, welcome. All this is a weekly segment where I get all new entries into the Billboard Hot 100 and give each a letter grade and take one that's the worst, take one that's the best. That's all it is. And yeah, thanks for tuning in on this weekly segment I do on my podcast where I talk about music. Overall, this is from the week of June 5th. Overall, the episode is consists of various artists. We have some stuff from a Boogie with the Hoodie, Lil Durk, Marshmello and Jonas Brothers have a track on here. 42 Dugg and Future, Lil Nas X is on here. City Girls, Polo G and Lil Wayne. And then of course we have an album bomb from Olivia Rodrigo coming into this episode. That will take up a good portion of the latter half, I guess, of the tracks that I cover. If you were interested at all in my thoughts on the Olivia Rodrigo Sour album, you're pretty much going to get it here. I may do a solo review of the album too eventually, but we're covering it on Best and Worst Track of the Week here right now. If you're interested in any of that, stick around. But before we get started, just want to let everyone know there's last week's episode is up. It was Lainey Wilson versus Bella Poarch. I dug that track from Lainey Wilson, this newer country artist. I thought it was an excellent debut. I am not seeing really the significance of the Bella Poarch track, honestly. To me, it sounded quite generic. And the track just seemed to piggyback off of internet pop culture references. We also had some stuff from Nicki Minaj and from her mixtape stuff. And then also, this was pretty much the J. Cole album bomb episode. But there's different artists on here. Young Boy Never Broke Again, Internet Money. That was a pretty decent week overall. If you're interested in my thoughts on, especially on the J. Cole album, if you don't want to listen to the whole review I did, you can pretty much get a gist of what I thought on that episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week. And then also look out for a YouTube-only episode that I'll be dropping probably before this episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week. So if you're on this episode, you can go back. It's a new EP review, probably the first EP I covered on the podcast, of the new Sam Gelatry EP that released a few weeks ago. The title of the EP is 4 in Roman numerals. So I thought it was a pretty consistent EP from front to back. Not too long, of course, being an EP, but I highly recommend listening to that project. And also, if you're interested in my thoughts, keep a lookout on that video that will be on YouTube only. Like I said, it's the first EP review I'm doing, so it's probably something new that hopefully I'll continue doing. We'll see what happens. Let's go ahead and get into the gist of the episode. So overall, this week on the Hot 100, it didn't feel too different from last week. There was an album bomb from a relevant, sort of prominent artist. Difference being that J. Cole was the last one, and this week happens to be from Olivia Rodrigo, and that's their debut album. And I'm not really too sure how she sort of fits into today's current music scene. She is certainly fresh. There's certainly a lot of high hopes, and she's certainly seen as a prospect in the music industry, especially with how solid everything has been received and how big she's developed a fan base. But I don't know really my full thoughts on Sour yet, but it's an interesting debut album. I just don't know how it will hold up a year from now, if anyone's still going to be talking about it. And then also if anyone will really care for any further projects from her because of how fast-paced the music industry moves, especially with younger artists and who's the next fresh face. I'll say that. I just really hope the 15 minutes, or there really isn't 15 minutes for Olivia Rodrigo. Hopefully society is focused enough to not completely forget about this project, by the end of this year. But yeah, the remainder of the tracks were pretty much hip-hop centric. The typical usual names that you could guess. Like I said, Boogie with the Hoodie, Lil Durk, 42 Dugg, that seems to be dropping in a few singles. This is like the third or fourth one I've covered thus far. Lil Nas X. So, not the most diverse week when you're taking Sour out of consideration, but overall, genuinely enjoyed listening to most of these tracks. So, some highlights on the chart overall. A new number 1 by BTS with the track Butter. I'm honestly almost shocked that this got a number 1 hit. But I do kind of have to backtrack and think about how big that K-pop fan base is, especially with BTS probably being the biggest act in it right now. But I was almost certain Olivia Rodrigo would get a #1 hit this week, but it seems like Good For You, which was #1 last week, went down to #2, and that's even taking into consideration the album bomb numbers that she would have had to put up. So, but I will say she did kind of cut through with Deja Vu being up to #3, so that's interesting. Some more head scratchers though. Save Your Tears by The Weeknd, now officially with Ariana Grande credited, up to #7. I really don't understand how this track still has traction, even amongst 2 album bombs the past couple weeks. Also, another head scratcher, Montero, Call Me By Your Name by Lil Nas X, up to 13. Not to say that I'm not surprised that he has a hit this high up, but this track's been around for a while now, and I thought people were maybe losing some interest by this point. And he also had a fresher single debut this week that's considerably lower. And then Heat Waves up to 37 by Glass Animals. This track we've been following for a few months now. It's slowly been creeping up. I don't know really if it's gonna get all that much higher, but I don't know. It's summer's approaching. It is a sort of summer type of jam. Who knows? Minimum Wage by Blake Shelton. It debuted like maybe a couple weeks ago, up to 70. I guess this is really making its rounds off of contemporary country radio. A lot of people are really probably digging this. I don't know. I didn't think it was the worst thing I've heard. But I don't know. If this is a huge country hit, congrats to Blake Shelton. Streets by Doja Cat. Don't really know why I included this as a highlight, but it dropped down to 79. I thought this track was quite good when it made its debut a few months ago. It's hung around, but it looks like it's kind of on its way out. So I do think the track maybe deserved a little bit more, attention. And then Wayless Said by AJR, another one that I'm just like, I'm kind of thankful it's not becoming a sort of under the radar hit like Bang was. It seems like it's on its way out. It moved down to 94 this week, but hell, I've seen stuff be quite resilient this low in the chart and hang on for a little bit longer, so we'll see. And then Things a Man Ought to Know by the new artist we covered last week. Their name was Lainey Wilson. I really dug the track, but it seems like a lot of other people did it, so it's down to 100. Hopefully this becomes a hit, though. I really would like country radio to pick this up. And then also a debut that dropped out already that came in last week, His and Hers by Internet Money. I was really thinking this would have became the next hit like Lemonade was for them, but especially considering the features with like Lil Uzi Vert and Roddy Ricch on there and Gunna, it's already out. And then The Business by Tiesto, a track that was pretty good. It maybe could bounce back in the summer, but seems like it already lost its legs, but I thought maybe it could have cracked it a little bit higher. And then Higher Power as well by Coldplay is out. Made its debut like a couple weeks ago. I'm not too surprised, especially with how hip hop centric and how more progressive the chart has gone, really leaning more towards newer artists. I'm kind of surprised it's already jumped out, especially with like tracks by Imagine Dragons already hanging on. I really feel like an alternative artist like Coldplay, quote unquote alternative artists, would have hung on a bit longer. And then most of the J. Cole album bomb dropped out or sunk. And then also like 75% of the Nicki Minaj mixtape is out this week. So those were some highlights. Let's get into some tracks. Alright, so first track coming in this week, we have at 92, 24 Hours, a Boogie with the Hoodie, featuring Lil Durk. This track didn't really quite hit or sound like I thought it would, although I will admit I'm not too acquainted with the Boogie with the Hoodie style, but I have done a fair amount of listening to Lil Durk at least for the past year or so, simply because of this segment. But this is very similar to like a very slow alt R&B type of track, especially in the instrumental. It's a little bit like Jhené Aiko-like. It's slow. It's very centered around trap R&B too. And it just, like I said, it's a bit uncharacteristic like Lil Durk. Lil Durk seems to typically go off of these piano bass instrumentals, and the tracks usually consist of like some street hard knock sort of hood aesthetic. Yeah, this was different. There's a deep sub bass supporting this track. It does make it sound a bit interesting, but everything just is a bit too heavy on the reverb, especially like in the vocals. The track's a bit vibey, a little anticlimactic, pretty sexualized as well. It feels like this track was forced out to compete with the Calling My Phone song by Black and Lil TJ, but honestly, I think that track is a bit more captivating, hooky, and overall, I guess, better constructed. But this was interesting. I do like seeing Lil Durk in a different context, but I don't really know if he excels in this situation. And Boogie with the Hoodie, I'll be frank, I don't really know if this distinguishes him as an artist. I don't know that much of his discography, but this certainly really doesn't make me want to look into more, but I probably will have to eventually, so I gave this a C. The beat is also pretty bouncy with this thumpy synth bass cutting through. Future seems to rap a bit more as opposed to like his typical crooning style as well. And then 42 Dugg is probably the most interesting thing on here. He has like this twangy delivery. It sounds like he's trying to put like this southern accent on like certain inflections when he acts or when he raps. So I don't know. This was an interesting track. I thought it was better than I thought it was going to be, so I give it a B-. Next track we got a track called Maybach by 42 Dugg and featuring Future at 68. I don't really have too much to say about 42 Dugg other than it seems like he's the next guy in line to be like the current innocuous trap rapper making waves and just putting out these singles every other week or so or every other month that I guess debuted onto the Hot 100. To be honest, it's about as interesting as most Moneybagg Yo tracks, so I'll give it that. Next track, Twerkulator by City Girls at 51. This is a duo that I really think is a bit underrated, but they just don't seem to, I guess, be as consistent as other female artists in this sort of vein. I guess, for instance, maybe like a Megan Thee Stallion or a Doja Cat. But this track wasn't bad. It sounds like it samples like some sort of 90s dance club sort of beat. The whole aesthetic of this is just very electronic dance music from, I guess, a retro style. I think it's from the 90s. The track has some moments like an eerie and retro synth melody on the hook that overall makes the track a bit better. The second City Girl verse is a bit more captivating. Whoever goes on that, I will say is probably the stronger one in this situation. But I will say the track cuts out a bit too soon, but it's not bad. I give it a B. And coming in here at number 29, this is the first of the Olivia Rodrigo album Bomb. So we are going to cover each track that debuted this week onto the Hot 100 off of her album Sour. First one is Hope You're Okay at 29. This track was interesting. There's an opening instrumental that sounds like an effect-driven ukulele or even mandolin. But the texture on it and the color is just so dry. Next track, Sun Goes Down, Lil Nas X at 66. This was a pretty decent track. It's a bit different from what I'm used to hearing from this artist. It's mid-tempo pop R&B sort of thing, some light guitar textures guiding the track all throughout. It's definitely leans on being more of like a ballad or a romantic type of track. I will say that the production is a bit bland in some points, like the drum machine that's thrown on here. But Lil Nas X's vocals are quite convincing. I think the track goes, at moments for like an emotional catharsis, and it does hit it. So I give it a B. It doesn't really blend in with any of the other textures on this track. There's a muddy bass on here that can be a bit unflattering at times, but admittedly it does provide some warmth to this track. But all throughout, there's several influences that she kind of touches throughout this whole thing. This to me sounds like a bit slightly on the country side, maybe like a more pop country Casey Musgrave sort of thing. But the track sort of does transition to like this formulaic Lana Del Rey ultraviolence influence that she pretty much did on Driver's License as well on the bridge. And also the pacing of it just feels like it was off of the last Julian Baker album. I don't know. There's a lot of different components going into this, but overall I don't think it was executed to its full potential. I give it a C. Jealousy is the next one off Sour at 24 by Olivia Rodrigo. This was probably one of the more upbeat, captivating ones on the album that wasn't a lead single. In my opinion, the track kind of just sounds a bit like an alternative sort of style that was probably more big towards the mid 2010s, like a la Bishop Briggs or Alice Merton. The vocal harmony moments are quite beautiful, though, when they're used all throughout the track. And this is probably one of the more mature tracks I've heard from her, honestly. The groove that structures the track overall, especially in the chorus, is quite captivating. There's an angsty attitude on here that I think works. It's not bad. I give it a B. Next track, Off of Sour by Olivia Rodrigo at 19. One step forward, three steps back. In my opinion, there's really not all too much to say other than it sounds a lot like something that would have came off of Folklore, the Taylor Swift album last year. It's very piano-centric, some light keyboard instrumental that fills out the track all throughout. Lyrically, it's similar to Taylor as well. It's a bit too stripped down for my liking, and honestly, I kind of unofficially heard it, but I think the reason this sounds so much like Folklore is because I think maybe Taylor and Jack Antonoff had a hand in this. So yeah, I give it a C+. Next track, Favorite Crime by Olivia Rodrigo at 18. This is one of the few that kind of hit like on this indie folk aesthetic. There's a plucked acoustic guitar all throughout this. It's a bit Lorde-like, especially with the vocals on the bridge and the chorus. There's also like a nice tension that's created throughout the chorus. It's paced quite nicely. The climatic moment we get where there are more pronounced vocals on the last chorus was quite nice as well. There's a emotional catharsis that's brought out that hits quite well. I give it a B. Next track, Happier by Olivia Rodrigo at 15. This kind of just feels like an Adele song with the piano instrumentation and the resentful lyrics, honestly. The track is just a bit bare. There's some clicky percussive textures, a very redundant piano ostinato melody that really doesn't develop into anything. A predictable string synth section that's used on the climatic moments, and it kind of also reminds me a bit like some lackluster work from an artist like Conan Gray. I give this a C. Next track, Enough For You by Olivia Rodrigo at 14. Here we get another folk-centric kind of track. It's almost country-like at points. It's just missing a bit of twang. It kind of has like a Taylor Swift breakup song written all over it as well. Maybe some slight Hayley Williams influence on the vocals and how she sings stylistically on here. This was just middle of the road. I give it a C. Brutal by Olivia Rodrigo, number 12. This is the intro track on the album, and I thought it was a pretty decent one. There's a serene string opening that kind of transitions to like some edgy rock style. It's kind of like the same gist you get of one of those songs from the Battle of the Bands scene on Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I appreciate the energy that is presented, taking into consideration this was the opener. There is a sense of angstiness to this that I like. The guitar riff the song revolves around, though, can feel a bit worn out, though, especially as the track progresses. But I'm not really sure what else to think, so I give this a B-. Next track at number 9, the last one off of the album bomb that debuted, Traitor by Olivia Rodrigo. This one really feels like a Julian Baker track. The instrumental sounds like it was practically written off of the last Julian Baker album. The tempo, the pacing, it's quite similar. I think she's done better than this, especially with the lead singles, Deja Vu and Good For You. The build-up that it all leads up to on this track is just a bit predictable and ineffective. And I'm not really sure what else to think other than it sounds like less sophisticated Julian Baker, so I give it a C. And then finally, the number 1 track this week, Butter by BTS. Definitely one of the more dancier type of tracks I've heard from BTS. And I do dig the transition that we get as we transition into the chorus. It hits quite directly and is the stronger point of the track too once we get to that point of the song. There's some nice synthy textures that color the track all throughout. But I will say the track does hit its speed bumps, especially when the rapping hits. It's pretty mid, like most BTS rapping features, or not features, but just rapping sections. It's not bad. It's very concise and to the point. Nothing groundbreaking for them, but also it's consistent all throughout for the most part. So I gave that a B. Alright, so we are at that point in the episode where I present best and worst track of the week. We always start on worst track of the week, so we end up on a good note. And this worst track of the week, when I first saw this track debut on the list of debuts this week, I immediately knew it probably wasn't going to be my cup of tea. And the first time I listened to this, I didn't really bother listening to all that much. I It's pretty much confirmed. It was Leave Before You Love Me by Marshmello and Jonas Brothers at 85. Not too much to say on here other than it sounds like a rip-off of a Weeknd song. And it sounds almost like a dozen other tracks that have dropped, especially with some 80s flair on it. Also, what is Marshmello's signature contribution to this? Is it the guitar playing? Because if it is, what is he really doing that is different than a studio musician that could have been hired to do that? Or overall in the production, what's his sort of, I guess, signature contribution to this? Because it sounds sanitary and generic like any other Jonas Brothers track, honestly. So I'm just a bit perplexed by the overall contribution that Marshmello put on this track to justify his name as an artist. Because honestly, if I didn't know who Marshmello was and I wanted to learn more about the song, if I was just listening to this for the first time, I was like, wow, Jonas Brothers, but who's that Marshmello guy? What is he doing? I think a lot of people would have a hard time explaining that. And, that just bothers me a bit. And at times, the vocals sound a bit Adam Levine-like from one of the Jonas Brothers, I think maybe Nick. So, this just completely bothered me because of how unoriginal and the lack of significance on Marshmello's part, too. I mean, I know the Jonas Brothers are going to do what they're going to do, but this sounds like something that would have happened without Marshmello's contribution, honestly. So what's the point of Marshmello? Okay, so best track of the week. This one surprised me, Gang Gang by Polo G and Lil Wayne. And really this just comes down to how, I guess, colorful and I guess engaging the track is. I love the energy that Polo G comes into on this track with right off the bat. The spacey synth textures coloring the instrumental all throughout are quite nice. It's one of the most interesting trap beats I've ever heard, honestly. The instrumental is just excellent. The articulation that Wayne throws in on his delivery as he is featured on this track, it's quite good. It's almost like vintage Lil Wayne. He fits in pretty well on this track. He also goes for like this, I guess, this contemporary melodic singing rap style that is just blended all throughout, that he's kind of doing, I guess, simultaneously. It's not bad. And it's just a good track from beginning to end. It's probably the most consistent thing I heard this week. So yeah, best track of the week goes to Gang Gang and Polo G. Gang Gang by Polo G and Lil Wayne. But yeah, if you stuck with me to the end of this episode, that's it for this week. Join me next week. And thanks for listening once again. And if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, leave a comment, good or bad. And then if you're on your preferred listening service, thanks for listening on there. Subscribe there too if you want to. I'll see you next time.